The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, good afternoon. Good to have you with us. I'm Bill Martinez. And the question that abounds is what's going on with America here? I mean, are we losing this or what? What happened to the Declaration of Independence? You know, that Declaration of Independence thing that said that we had every right and an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Oh, what's going on? Our government seems to be disconnected from that reality. Remember, there was a government before that was, and this is what motivated our founding fathers and the early patriots to draft up the Declaration of Independence so they could announce their grievance, not only to the king, but also to the world. And what we perceive to be, I say we, corporate we, those of us who are constitutionalists believe to be the remedy. So between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, of this democratic republic, not a democracy, the powers to be would want to talk in terms of democracy. We do not have a democracy. By even suggesting that demonstrates that they are really, out of step, and they should not be leading the country because they don't understand the definition of a democratic republic any more than they understand the definition of a woman. Think about it. This is all causing all kinds of confusion and a hot mess for we, the American people. Now, Scott Powell is going to be joining us. He is the author and member of the Committee on Present Danger China and the senior fellow at Discovery Institute. He's got a new book out that you must read and get your hands on. It's called Rediscovering America. It's a timely, relevant book that will cause you to go back and really remember the true history of our country, not the narrative that's been pushed out there, whether it's the 1619 Project, whatever Black Lives Matter, or whatever narrative our current regime would want us to believe, because this is all part and parcel of a plan, okay? This is not by accident. This is being planned. It's being done to us. It is not a government of, for, by the people. It is a government of, for, by the ruling class. This is where America is today. Scott Powell, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us, sir.
Thank you, Bill. Great to be with you and your audience. Very good introduction. You framed it very well.
Well, Scott, you have been monitoring this quite closely over the years. This hasn't been something that's just been, something you woke up with yesterday. We have seen the trajectory towards really ultimately communism. I mean, we can call it Marxism, call it socialism, but we know that all those roads lead to communism, where, as Klaus Schwab said, you will own nothing and you will like it. So this movement toward a one world government continues to trundle forth. And meanwhile, it is us, we the people, that are getting clobbered. And let's turn the lights on and show you who's clobbering you, right?
Absolutely. We have the benefit of several people that defected from communist systems who are very insightful about the communist playbook is. What is the strategy to undermine other countries and bring them into the communist world? We thought that with the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet system came down, that the world had changed, but actually China is a more formidable enemy than probably the Soviet Union was. But we do have a defector from the old Soviet system, a KGB defector whose name was Yuri Bezmenov. And he came to the West, he defected, I believe, to Canada, got into the United States, and he began educating the American people about what the playbook looks like, what it is. And he says, it's predictable. We do this every time. This is how we take over nations. And they start off with the first stage is demoralization, where you seek to demoralize the society. And that would mean you attack their beliefs. In our case, it would be our Judeo-Christian heritage.
Right.
You would attack the family, and you would separate the people from their heritage. In other words, you would disconnect them to their roots, to their history. So that's the first stage, demoralization.
Well, hang on 1 second, Scott, just real quick on demoralization. What's key to this is the truth gets obliterated, doesn't it?
Yes.
There's no truth. It all becomes relative. It sounds good. Sounds hunky-dory. Your truth is your truth. My truth is my truth. No, there's only one truth. But we're going to get you off that, off that anchoring, that mooring of truth, and now let it be fluid. The truth is not fluid. That's when you begin to go slip sliding away, as the song would go, right?
That's correct. That's right. So on that foundation of demoralization, the first stage, and this stage can take a generation or more to accomplish. In other words, these communists are very patient. This is their playbook. They first set about demoralizing the target society. So we've been under demoralization since the 1970s. Before, you could say that it started with, taking prayer out of schools. And of course, the communists didn't necessarily orchestrate it all, but they have had a playbook to basically separate us from our Christian heritage, our Judeo-Christian heritage, to marginalize it. So it's no longer the animus of how people think and act. So once that's accomplished, say after a generation or even 2 generations, then the stage is set for disorientation. And disorientation takes place when, and let's use the example of the United States, how we were thoroughly when the COVID pandemic was rolled out. But when the COVID pandemic rolled out and we had mandatory mask mandates and social distancing, and there was no, we didn't follow normal medical protocols of applying therapeutic preventative medication to stop the virus, but rather we actually blocked people's access to knowing what would be an effective therapeutic, because the agenda was to have mass vaccination. And the vaccination that was developed was emergency use only. That means that it didn't go through all the testing. And in order for that to be rolled out, there could be no competing therapeutic medications.
And of course, we know after the fact there was, Scott.
Oh, absolutely. You had hydroxychloroquine, you had ivermectin, to name only 2, and there are more. So that was disorienting us from the normal protocols of life as we had known it. And then adding to that, we had, by the summer of 2020, remember COVID really broke out in late February, and all of what I've just described took place really from that time on. And into the summer, we had an event with George Floyd being killed. He was under police custody, and unfortunately, he lost his life. But he was on fentanyl as a drug too. So we don't really necessarily,
something like 300-400% of fentanyl that will kill anybody, right?
Right. So anyway, he died, and that was used as a catalyst to bring about turmoil in urban America, to launch a new attack on the police. Police brutality, the racist police came under attack, and riots broke out across in many major cities, causing several $1 billion of damage. And it seemed as though no one could do anything about it. The police were ineffective. Exactly. So this was an example of disorientation. Why are our cities burning and the police are not able to arrest people and stop this crazy?
It's mostly a peaceful protest, Scott Powell.
Well, that's what
we're talking Scott Powell here. He is a member He's an author and member of the Committee on Present Danger China, senior fellow at Discovery Institute. Go ahead and pick it up from there, Scott, if you would, please,
Okay.
because we had mostly peaceful protests, and as you're lining this out, I mean, it's amazing because here it is, as you said, we had a questionable, election, the Jan 6 riots, we get COVID, and I mean, it is like we're getting pummeled with one crisis after another, right?
Yes, you jumped ahead a little bit. I was still in the
Yes.
period of the summer craziness of cities burning, riots, looting, huge damage done, very disorienting to people. Very, very disorienting. Why is this happening? They couldn't understand. They couldn't understand why the police couldn't get it under control. And then to top that off, what happened in these cities, in many of these Democrat-dominated cities, they undertook defunding the police. Here you have your cities burning, law breaking at record levels, and you want to defund the police? If that's not disorienting to the American people, I don't know what would be. So then,
Scott, everything they counted on, though, Scott, think about it. Police stations are being burnt down. These institutions that we could trust in. I mean, there's no wonder it was causing brain damage to the constituency, as you say.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And then, but now that we can reflect back on it, we can see that it may have been a plan. The COVID, the so-called pandemic, was rolled out in order to put great fear in people, and for the operatives who want to subvert our country, to create an environment of changed election protocols. And isn't it interesting that they focused on the swing states? They knew that the battleground states would be these swing states, which would include Arizona, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. So they changed the voting laws. They expanded mail-in ballots. They expanded the use of ballot through placing ballot boxes, and they extended the period of time for counting votes. Normally elections, we knew what the outcome was in the same day that we voted. Remember those days?
Right. Exactly.
Well, that was all changed.
Yeah.
And of
it's
course,
funny. It's funny, Scott. That changed, but still, when primaries come up, we know each day before midnight what happens at during primary days. We're getting those numbers when we do the primary, but somehow when we get to the general election, that's a problem, right?
Well, it's a problem in those states that changed their protocols of the election regulations and rules, and that was established by the states. But it was done as a plan in order to basically rig the election and deprive Donald Trump of a second term.
How can you possibly say, Scott, I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but how can people possibly say that it wasn't rigged? I mean, the evidence to me is so clear and empirical. I mean, you have to really stick your head in the sand to think, when you consider all these things that you're laying, and you're just laying out, fractions of the issue that related to the, to that election of 2020.
That's right. That's right. So if people are really interested, there's plenty of evidence now on the internet. And we may see something happen here between now and election time. I just don't know that there will be a judicial proceeding to get to the bottom of what happened on November 3rd of 2020. It's now, 3.5 years ago, right?
Right.
But
meanwhile, look at the damage, though, Scott, that has been done because of this. And also, the violation of trust, getting back to demoralization, the damage that it did to the American people and the psyche, that they could no longer trust the institution to make sure they could oversee a free and fair election. I mean, this damage is incomprehensible. And I think that it's going to take us a while to rectify.
Yes. And so let's look at a more recent development, the lawfare that's going on against Donald Trump, where he's facing 4 different lawsuits that have, many of them have no grounds whatsoever. His current case in New York on the so-called hush money was already dismissed before. It was adjudicated before. Why is it coming up again?
More than once, Scott.
Yes. So this lawfare is a strategy that is being used to prevent Donald Trump from being able to campaign and to hopefully the opposition wants to, soil his character, make him, make him a felon, send him to jail, and so forth.
And redirect campaign resources in much the same way. Again, this is a pattern. Okay, they're doing this with Bobby Kennedy, right? They don't want Bobby Kennedy. They're not going to give him, Secret Service security, which you would think a Kennedy. I think they've had a couple people assassinated in the family. Shouldn't he have a Secret Service detail? Oh no, we're going to make him redirect that money instead of going into promoting his campaign. We're going to have him redirect that for security. So this is a pattern, is what you're saying.
It's very much a pattern, and these things are all being done willfully to basically continue this movement towards a one-party rule, one-party state, and it's a globalist elite that's behind it all. So it isn't, we're not going to come out the other side if we don't stop this. It's not as though we're going to recover the system that we've had. We have to stop this because we have, a proliferation of major corruption throughout our government, involving the intelligence agencies, involving the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, look at the crime that's being committed against the American people by keeping this border open.
Yes,
this is outrageous. This is a betrayal of the American people. The government's first job is to protect the American citizens, the American people. Well, it's not doing that now, is it?
No. Yeah, exactly.
It's betraying its fundamental mandate. So all of this, though, is part of this plan to demoralize, to disorient, because the crisis event that was the third stage of this communist takedown is called the crisis stage, and I believe that they viewed the election in 2020 to be just that. That would be the crisis. We can commit vote fraud, get rid of Donald Trump, and this, irrespective of what happens, the crisis environment enables this assault on America to continue more easily than would happen otherwise. And so when the crisis comes and you have a falsified election, and you have a fraudulent leader who's been compromised by foreign powers, which we know, then you've got a country that is no longer has legitimate leadership. You've got a country that's being led by people that may have a loyalty to a global new world order, and it certainly appears that is the case. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have, in another month, I believe, we're going to have a recognition that Joe Biden will have to decide whether he wants to go forward signing this new protocol, giving the World Health Organization total control over America in the event of another pandemic. And we know that they're planning another pandemic.
It's already there. I mean, the bird flu we're set up for it. They've orchestrated this. They've engineered it. As they say, which Ron Paul has indicted them for and challenged them in Senate hearings. This gain of function idea, which is nothing more than biological warfare. It's just a different word for it. But because they changed the term, they're able to get away with it, because biological warfare was agreed to be illegal and verboten. But, these bureaucrats can't help themselves. These mad scientists, Scott, and look at the damage they're doing when we still don't even know the origins of COVID, and they continue to move forward And then, of course, part of the problem that we have in Ukraine is we understand there's biolabs there in Ukraine. No wonder the United States is trying to cover their back end there.
Yes, yes. And
I mean,
Ukraine
it's pervasive. That's the problem. But go ahead.
Ukraine is probably one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and it has always been a nexus and hub for money laundering. We know that from the Biden family. We know that from other people. So I think we can see it very clearly that the agenda is really to keep the corrupt, the money flow coming to the corrupt parties,
of course,
in and outside the United States government. There's no way that Ukraine can prevail over Russia. So the money that's going there is money down the rat hole, except that there are a lot of kickbacks to some of the political leaders that have facilitated it. So we're in a critical time now. We have to have a house cleaning in America. We can't just, we can't allow this level of corruption to subvert our constitutional republic. Right. And that's why, of course, they're scared to death of Donald Trump. They want to deny him a second term. I mean, he's on the, at his rallies, he doesn't hold anything back about what he intends to do.
Right. Well, he's not beholden, to the traditions of the Beltway, certainly, and the deep state. Right. We're talking with the author and member of the Committee on the Present Danger of China, senior fellow at Discovery Institute, Scott Powell, continues with us. And we're breaking down the Bezmenov Plan, which, you think of it, it came, from the communists. But actually, Scott, you could say the FBI and CIA have utilized the same thing in, trying to, effect regime change around the world. And look at what they've done, time and again, have meddled in other nations in changing regimes. And what good at the end of the day has it done for America or the world?
Well, they learned how to do it in other countries like Ukraine with the color revolution. And they learned doing it that they could also do it in America.
Well, they are doing it in America.
So the FBI and the CIA were involved in the fraud of 2020.
Exactly.
And they will be involved in some way in this upcoming election. But the numbers for Trump look so strong that it may be very difficult to pull off vote fraud again. So we'll see. It could be a pandemic. It could be a cyber security attack. But we have to be prepared for it all. And everybody hearing this program has to be involved and insist and get involved with assuring that we have an election on November 5th.
Right.
If it needs to be paper ballots, so be it. In fact,
I would prefer paper ballots anyway. Exactly.
There should be no excuse that we do not have an election. We had elections through every world war we've been involved with. Civil War, First World War, Second World War, Korea, Vietnam. We never, ever did not have an election. Mm-hmm. So the American people have to insist that they are voting. Yes. There will be an election.
Well, and that's the call to action right there, Scott, is people need to get off their butts. They need to register to vote. They have to vote. Do whatever you can, because we have to overwhelm the cheating. And because I would say, Scott, yes, you look at the polling numbers. I mean, Biden's numbers are plummeting at such a level. You think, how is it possible for him to be reelected?
It's impossible.
The measure of cheating would have to be incremental.
It is impossible, and therefore we have to anticipate the unexpected, thing to happen, to prevent the November election from taking place.
Yeah. Well, that would be the most paramount, I think, that if the election didn't take place, that would be a huge crisis. But the other is that the election does go through, and in light of all that's been going on, the lawfare against Trump, Biden's polling numbers, the border, Afghanistan, go right on down the line, our national insecurity, all brought to you by the Democratic Party, particularly the left wing of the party. But you got to put it at the doorstep, because when they go to vote, they all vote lockstep. So you're saying, you can have some Democrats say, well, that wasn't me. I had to go along with it. Well, no, you went along with the party, and you are just as responsible to taking this country down and ignoring our constitutional rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so this is on you. It's not just on Joe Biden. And the American people need to understand that if we're going to do the same thing that the Patriots did in the 1700s, then we need to come together. And we're also, Scott Powell, in my humble opinion, I think we're going to need some outside help, because it's not going to just be just patriots in America, just like in the same way in the 1700s. We counted on other nations to help us overcome the prevailing force that was, so immoral and out of control.
Yeah, our challenges are every bit as great as they were at the founding of the country. We're really in a time of the Second American Revolution. And the reasons for our revolution are revolting against the system, as we did nearly 250 years ago, are largely the same reasons. Look what's happening. We've had illegals coming into our country, and what's the government doing? It's forcing homeowners, private citizens, to quarter them in their homes, in their apartment buildings. That was one of the primary complaints that the Patriots had in 1775, quartering.
Yeah, not much has changed, right? There's nothing new under the sun.
No, we face the same challenges, but with our challenges are very great because of technology, the ability to manipulate information is great. The ability to manipulate voting machines, election technology. So that's one reason that I wouldn't mind if we shut the election down and the American people say, fine, we're going back to paper ballots.
Right. One day voting. One day voting. And paper ballots. Scott, you make an excellent point here of where we are. And even in your book, in Rediscovering America, I mean, think about it. If you didn't have America to begin with, it didn't need to be rediscovered. Okay. So we knew that, and have experienced historically, those of us who believe in history and have read it, believe in the history of this great country of ours. So now we need to reconnect and rediscover. So compared to where they were in the 1700s, a lot that they were talking about was, this was theoretical. Yes, they did go and, and Jefferson and, all Franklin, they all went on a search, a mission to search out other countries, other constitutions, other rules of government. They searched the historical record to come up with this, but pretty much they were starting with a blank sheet of paper. The good news is here in America, we already have documents. We have a battle plan that worked effectively for us for many years. And what we have done is we have turned our back on this, and we've allowed, people, because they're dressed as patriots, we've allowed them, to come into our country, even born out of our country, and to assail all the things that are good and righteous about this democratic republic.
Well, we have our work cut out for us, but I am optimistic, and I'll tell you why I'm more optimistic than say I was 2 years ago. Because the Bezmenov strategy, I think, has met its match. It's not able to cross that Rubicon of totally demoralizing and disorienting the American people. The American people, on the contrary, have been waking up very rapidly to their corrupt government, that they no longer trust the government. They no longer trust the medical establishment because they tried to poison us through vaccination. The school system is corrupt. People don't trust the school system.
Exactly.
And all of this is good because we were designed to be a country that was governed by the people, of the people, and for the people. So we recognize that that's now been taken away from us. We have a government that is out of touch with the people, and it's run by corrupt elites.
Exactly.
Corrupt elites. We have to take this back. And
Right.
so it's not going to be done overnight. I mean, it can certainly be greatly facilitated by a changing of the guard. And it looks like Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. If he's allowed to serve, I believe he'll be elected overwhelmingly if there's a legitimate election. But still, that it's going to require all of us to be involved. All of us
but
to
that
push.
in and of itself, though, Scott, is not the answer, because him getting elected is step one. Step two is draining the swamp and really getting us back to standard as a democratic republic, right?
And that's where we can reflect back on our history. The power of rediscovering America is that it describes many previous times in our country where it seemed that all was lost, that there wasn't a way forward. For instance, let's just go back to the original revolution. You had 13 disparate states. There was no telephone, telegraph, communication between those 13 colonies. How were 13 colonies going to rise up together and successfully fight and defeat the greatest military power of the world? And that was Great Britain. It's impossible. It could not happen. What did happen was that God, through his Holy Spirit, created a spiritual revival called the Great Awakening. And George Whitefield came from Great Britain. He traveled to all 13 colonies 7 times each. Wow. So he reached all the American people, all the adults heard George Whitefield speak and preach. A spiritual revival was created, the likes of which the country had never seen before. And this connected the American people and enabled them to join together to take on this great battle. And it was George Washington who showed the way. This man was exemplary in his courage, in his faithfulness. He was a man of tremendous faith. Exactly. One of the most interesting stories about Washington was when he was serving under General Braddock and in a brigade of about 1,400 people. They were ambushed in the Monongahela Valley. All the officers were killed, including General Braddock. George Washington was the junior most officer. He was only a colonel. They shot out two horses out from Washington, but they couldn't get him. The Indians, the sharpshooters, couldn't take Washington down. Finally, he decided they had to retreat because they'd lost half their troops. That night, when Washington took off his military coat, he had 4 bullet holes through his coat. 4 bullet holes. Now, you could explain 1 or 2 of those as maybe a graze of a bullet that missed his, but he had not a scratch on his body. He wrote a letter to his brother in which he declared that he had been. He experienced the hand of God protecting his life that transformed his life and enabled him to lead as commander-in-chief the Continental Army, and he always led from the front. And when you're in the front on horseback, you are a target for being killed. But he knew he had God's protection. He was never wounded in the 6-year Revolutionary War.
That's amazing.
Now, he lost more battles than he won, but he persisted and wore down the British. So when he finally got the victory in Yorktown, the British were they had 6 years of this, and they knew that this man would not give up.
He just wouldn't die.
His faith, his commitment, his courage, and he was loved by the people. So the British finally said, we've had enough. This is the last battle. We will agree to give America its independence. And of course, that was the Paris Peace Treaty that was signed in 2 years later in 1783. But this was the beginning of America. It has this foundation, and we need to be connected to it because we need the same level of courage and persistence to win this next Revolutionary War, this next war for restoring our country. It's really a second revolution, and we need to have the same qualities that we can look back on in our history. And it wasn't just Washington. We had many other instances of amazing courage
Right. But
demonstrated.
Scott, it came down to who can you trust? And George
Right.
Washington clearly could trust God.
Yes,
And
he could.
Right?
He did trust God. He completely trusted God.
God trusted George Washington. By extension, he trusted America. And so again, here we are, this great American idea that the Pilgrims brought forth and it was birthed out of prayer. God honored that prayer and established a new covenant here in America. And we were given rise for I believe, a supernatural reason. And as long as we continue to honor our birthright, then it will go well for us. And what's happened recently, to your earlier point, Scott, is that we have dishonored our legacy and our birthright. Mm-hmm. And this is why we're dealing with some of the crises that we're dealing with. These are warning signs to correct course, are they not?
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. I would trace the beginning of demoralization in America to taking prayer out of schools in 1962, right? And then we had the sexual revolution in the late 60s. Then we legalized abortion in the early 70s. Then the next stage was, legalizing homosexual marriage. And now we're dealing with transgenderism, which is an assault on God's creation.
Exactly.
And it's a betrayal of these young people that are going through a difficult time because of the culture and so forth, that they're not getting guidance from the adults and the medical establishment. It's sick. How
are they going to relive their lives, Scott? This is one and done. I mean, come on.
Done. And everyone has to understand. So we need a spiritual revival, just as we did before the Revolutionary War. And there are pockets of spiritual revival that have been going on the last few years. Well, be aware that we may see a big spiritual revival coming before us. And that is what we need to save the country. Because it's not politics as much as it is the values of the American people, their thinking and their attitudes, which are shaped by their relationship with their Lord, with God.
Right.
And when you sever people from God, you open the door to all kinds of problems. And really the spiritual world around America has fundamentally changed, so that we're seeing evil running amok across our country now that we haven't seen before in our lifetime, in the life of the nation, really.
Right. Well, we've opened the door to it, no doubt. I mean, That's exactly what we're dealing with. And the thing is, because of our disorientation, we don't even know the difference between good and evil, Scott.
That's
this
right.
Is the added
attribute what I said very carefully. That's the goal of disorientation, is confusing people beyond the demoralization, so that they can their connection to the virtue of the past has been totally severed, and they have no understanding or ability to be able to think in terms of what is the truth and where should we go. And that makes people very vulnerable. That's why, by the way, what we've talked about isn't right out of the book Rediscovering America, but Rediscovering America gives the reader the foundation to deal with the problems that we have today. It's a great read, and it's an easy read. I designed it to be a short book written in stories of the key periods of American history, so a person that doesn't normally read books can really make it through this book very easily,
and kind of get a kind of a balance of it, because you've got a narrative that's been out there. Our history has been hijacked. And, these things aren't being taught in schools. I mean, so often today, young people, I will talk to them, Scott, and they go, where did you get that from? We never learned that in school. Well, no kidding. Why do you think that you didn't learn that in school? Do you think it was on purpose or by accident? Well, why do you think? Yeah. And you see the lights kind of going on and realizing that they begin to agree that they've been manipulated.
Yes.
Right?
Well, we really have a demonic forces working, and they've been working. They were less so in the early 20s, but as the country embraced secular progressive education, you took prayer out of school. We've seen our culture really just decline more rapidly than in any other time in our history.
We're a culture of death.
Right now we are.
Yeah, that's
So,
it. And the clear
what you're
difference
doing,
is,
Bill, I praise you for all the work you're doing, Bill. Keep it up, because you're the light and the salt. And I want to support you. And everybody that's listening, tell your friends about Bill's show, and get them off the couch and get them focused on saving America.
it starts with the truth, the whole truth and nothing but. And this is what we've been committed to ever since I got out of Bible college 15 years ago and felt God was calling me, to this ministry, to get behind the microphone. Because for many years in broadcasting, I was a delinquent, Scott. I was playing music, having fun, just living life and, bathing in the culture, really not paying a whole lot of attention. But for the last 15 years, I've had to pay attention. And like you, I have seen the decline of this great country of ours, a country that I served in the military for, to preserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and all our constitutional rights, our God-given rights as well. My brothers, my family, my dad was in World War II. My two other brothers, Vietnam era vets, Vietnam vets as well. So, we've been in the thick of it to defend this country. And, God has called me to this, to speak truth to power. And right now, power is not listening. Just like Pharaoh didn't listen, when Moses went to him, the king didn't want to listen to Benjamin Franklin or George Washington either. So this happens through the woof and wharf of history. And though you may get a little nervous, because I hear, people say, "Oh, Bill, I don't want to go to war." Well, guess what? You may not be interested in war. War is interested in you. And as Scott said earlier, quite clearly, you got to appreciate this is a spiritual battle. This is a spiritual war that is taking place. And you need to get armored up and fortified for that battle. That's like, because otherwise you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, so to speak. Right, Scott?
That's right. That's right. We really need to have the internal fortitude to defeat this enemy. We really do. And that means that we have to deepen our faith. We have to grow our courage. And we also have to have an attitude of never giving up and having persistence, just as Washington had.
Exactly.
And I have a couple other stories just to quickly share. The two groups that were early in founding America were the Pilgrims, who went to Plymouth, and the Puritans, exactly. John Winthrop, who went to the Boston area. Those were the two early settlements in Massachusetts. And both the Pilgrims under Bradford and the Puritans likened their journeying across the ocean. They likened the position of what they were doing to the Jewish people leaving Egypt, leaving Egypt for the promised land. That's exactly the key. You're going to the promised land. You're going to a better place. And both these groups came to America with that type of faith. These were very, very religious Christian people. And that is the foundation of our country. And that foundation enabled us to prosper more rapidly than any other country in civilization. Do you know that America, having only 4% of the world's population, is responsible for 96% of the creativity in the world today? 96% came from 4%. Why? Because of our foundation.
Exactly.
Our growth was so rapid. We have 25% of we created 25% of, about 30 or 40 years ago, America accounted for 50% of the world's wealth out of only 4% of its population. How do you explain that? It's God's blessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And here it is. Look at, Winthrop and, the Puritans and the Pilgrims, as you said, their mission was an adherence to God's universal command to take the gospel message to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the uttermost parts of the world. Look how much the gospel has spread out of the United States. Without the United States, you don't get the gospel message out to the rest of the world, do you?
No, you don't. Although the Koreans, for their size, are giving a run for our money. Korea is a very Christian country, and they're very active in sending out missionaries, which is wonderful.
Exactly. Yeah, they make you feel. I mean, here it is in America. I mean, America, the people go to church and they get cranky if the service lasts more than 50 minutes. You know, in Korea, and especially these underground churches in China, especially, Scott. I mean, they'll have church. I mean, it's 4 or 5 hours. So it would cause a lot of brain damage for the Western culture, you know. But this is the level of commitment, because they realize that what we're dealing with right now is so temporary, Scott. I mean, this is all temporal. You know, the big message of all this is eternity. You know, where are you going to be? Because there's a clear choice. There's nothing in between. It's either heaven or hell. You're either going to be with God or without God.
That's true.
And let me say this, okay? In case you have any question, you want to be with God, all right?
That's right. That's right. You want to be sure of that. And once you're sure of that, you have tremendous freedom and the basis for being able to get through difficult times with faith and optimism that you're going to get to the other side.
And it's threatening to other people that don't. And it's also can be a light, like Winthrop said, that light on a shining hill that attracts people to say, hey, right. Scott, what do you have I don't have? Why do you have peace in the midst of all this chaos? What is it?
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's why we're in a very fertile time for evangelism, because so many people are really disoriented, as we were talking about. They're confused, they're disoriented, they've lost trust in everything. Well, if you're in that state, you can fix that. You go back to the most trusted source of truth, the Bible.
Exactly. But like you said, Scott,
you learn how easy it is to become a Christian. It's far easier than any other religion. You don't have to have any works. You're accepted with all of your baggage, all of your sins. Mm-hmm. You are accepted
just as you are.
Welcome into God's family.
Yeah. Exactly.
And when you bring God in, you don't have to change anything right away. But if you bring God really into your life, what will happen is your appetite for smoking. You may lose you may get your weight under control more easily, and so forth. Whatever your problems are, when you bring God into your life and have him sit right next to you, guess what? He gives you help to do the things that you can't do on your own.
Yeah, because he has a mission for us. And that's what we're going to be measured on, is based on what did we do with the talents and gifts that he gave us? And here we are. I mean, don't check out. Don't check out and think, well, America's to hell in a handbasket. What difference does it make? It makes a difference. And even in these final hours, because you're going to be held accountable for it. This is why we do what we do, to encourage you, because I want you to be in the number. Okay. I want you to be in the parade, going to heaven, praising God and thanking him for what he has done. Because right now, though it may be a little bit scary, understand this. Jesus told us there will be wheats and tares. This is what's going on. Wheats and tares are growing up together. Don't freak out by the people around you, because they're very well could be, they could very well be, tares, not wheat. So you need to discern the wheat in your zip code and come together. And we need to come together for a common cause. And that common cause is that which gives glory to God. That's the bottom line, right, Scott? I'm going to let you finish it up. We got about a minute left. Go ahead.
Well said. I really can't add to that, Bill. But I would again return to what we talked about, that we are living in very difficult times, very confusing times. The Bible is your best roadmap. But in terms of understanding America's place in God's history, I think rediscovering America is perhaps the fastest way that you can learn that very unique history that we have. Because unlike other history books where it's who, what, when, and where, and it's boring, Rediscovering America is a relatively short book that tells the key stories that made America what it was before our decline. So right up through the middle of the 20s, right up to the 60s, America was an amazingly prosperous and godly country. And so it tells that whole story, that whole 200 plus years. And it's very, very powerful. And it's edifying because it's a source of hope for you.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say, it's going to make you proud to be an American once again.
Yeah.
Scott Powell, my friend, thank you so much for being with us. Scott is the author, as we've been saying, Rediscovering America. It's a timeless, relevant book. And it will, as he said, it will encourage you and it will get you excited about this great country to realize, God willing, maybe the best is yet to come. We'll have to wait and see. Scott's a member of the Committee on This Present Danger, China, and the Senior Fellow at Discovery Institute. Again, my friend, thank you for being with us. And thank you for sharing a part of your day with us. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you. And may he give you his peace. Thanks again. God bless. Take care.